Lord, have mercy upon us. Christ, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness hast appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of importance thrust in these islands. Let thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands, and of those whose interest thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Bill. Members, the House is now in session. The minutes of the 3rd of June have been circulated. Are there any amendments, corrections that are required? There are none. The minutes will be printed will be confirmed as printed. Thank you. Messages from the governor? There are none. Announcements by the speaker? Actually, I had 3 this morning. The first is that we have received notice from Minister Tanae Furbert that she'll be absent today, so we're just duly noticing, making that noted. The second item is I just want to bring to your attention the statement, the order paper today. We didn't have one of the statements that were on there, and that's a statement from the Premier. It will be included in today's statements, and I just want to make that an announcement before we get to that stage. The other piece that I want to do is basically to take a moment to do a little bit of, I guess, educational process for those who are listening. And when we sat last, I had a conversation afterwards from a member of the public who was a little concerned or confused in regard to why I didn't let a member speak a second time during the particular debate that was going on at that moment. And they didn't understand there was a process. So for those who are listening, let me just simply explain that. Understanding orders, Understanding Order 19, which speaks to how debates are to be processed and debated. A member is allowed to speak only once on any matter when the speaker is in the House. When the speaker is in the chair, we are in the House. When the speaker is out of the chair, we are in committee. In the committee phase, a member can speak as many times as they wish on a particular item. But when we're in the House, a member is only allowed to speak once, other than being able to rise a point of order on a matter. And at that particular case, that member that I was not allowed to speak the second time had already spoken the first time and had used their allowed occasion to speak on that particular matter. And I think because the member in the public who asked me about it was a bit concerned about it, I just thought there's an opportunity to educate the listening audience. We do know that you listen every week, and I hope that you can appreciate that. With that said, let's move forward. Messengers from the Senate? There are none. Papers and other communications to the House? There are none. Petitions? There are none. Statements by ministers and junior ministers? There are a total of 7 statements. There are 6 listed on the order paper. For the purpose of this morning, I'm going to actually start with the 6 that are listed. I'm going to ask the 7th one to come in at the end, only because we're trying to resolve and getting it on the SharePoint. It's up on the Parliament website, but it's not on the SharePoint, and we're trying to get it resolved at this moment. So, Deputy Premier, would you start with your statement this morning? Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning to members of the legislature and the listening public. Mr. Speaker, today I am tabling the bill entitled Domestic Partnership Act 2022 to amend the transitional period of the Domestic Partnership Act 2018 in light of the Privy Council judgment in the Attorney General for Bermuda versus Ferguson and others. Mr. Speaker, Section 53 of the Principal Act provides that a marriage is void unless the parties are respectively male and female. Mr. Speaker, Section 54 of the Principal Act provided for a transitional period, A, during which certain same-sex marriages entered into in Bermuda or on Bermuda registered ships will be valid, and B, before or during which certain overseas same-sex marriages could be recognized in Bermuda. The transitional period was defined as a period from May 2017, the date of the Supreme Court judgment in Godwin and DeRoche versus the Registrar General and others, until immediately before the commencement date of the Principal Act in the 1st of June 2018. Mr. Speaker, on June 6, 2018, the Supreme Court, under Justice Kawley, determined that Section 53 was unconstitutional, but his judgment was stayed pending appeal. On November 23rd, 2018, the Court of Appeal upheld the Supreme Court decision, though on different grounds, and refused to extend the stay previously granted by the Supreme Court. Consequently, from that date, same-sex marriages conducted in Bermuda and on Bermuda registered ships were not invalidated under Section 53, and certain overseas same-sex marriages could be recognized in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, on the 14th of March, 2022, the Privy Council overturned the decision of the Court of Appeal and determined that Section 53 was not unconstitutional. This cast doubt on the validity of same-sex marriages conducted in Bermuda or on Bermuda registered ships since the 1st of June 2018, and the recognition in Bermuda since that date of overseas same-sex marriages. Mr. Speaker, the uncertainty over the validity and recognition of same-sex marriages potentially has widespread negative effect on the rights previously enjoyed by the couples involved who were married lawfully under the law as it existed at the time, and who may suffer the loss or interruption of certain rights and benefits. It is therefore not tenable to leave the Act as it is without making the appropriate amendment. Mr. Speaker, the intention of the proposed amendment is to extend the transitional period to March 14th, 2022, to confirm the validity of same-sex marriages formalized according to the law of Bermuda prior to the Privy Council judgment, and recognize certain same-sex marriages formalized overseas during the extended transitional period. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Attorney General. Attorney General?
Just starting my video, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Here we are. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, members.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased today to be tabling in this Honorable House the bill entitled Criminal Code Amendment Act 2022. This bill seeks to amend temporary or sunset clause provisions in the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2012, which inserted the criminal offense of instructing a person to participate in unlawful gang activity and instituted increased sentences for offenses where unlawful gang activity is a feature of the criminal activity into the Criminal Code 1907. In effect, this amendment bill will permanently codify sections 33A, 70JA, and 70JB of the Criminal Code. These now vital provisions have been kept in operation by ministerial notices extending their effect since July 2012. Mr. Speaker, members and the public at large are agonizingly aware of the unprecedented scourge of gang-related criminal activity which has come to light in Bermuda society. Looking back to when the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2012 first became law, Bermuda was gripped for the first time in its history with increases in violent crime demonstrating the hallmarks of criminal organization into groups we rarely call gangs. In 2012, politicians were caught on the back foot because society was slow to accept the new reality that gangs were present and operating in Bermuda. One former premier, quite infamously, referred to the young people getting ensnared in this type of criminal activity as only 4%. With that backdrop, Mr. Speaker, we come to this moment in time which regrettably requires us as legislators to continue the intractability of gang-related crime in Bermuda, despite sustained policing efforts and inventive government-wide policies to dissuade young people from joining unlawful gangs and participating in unlawful conduct. Mr. Speaker, it is proper for other honorable members of the government to elucidate this House with updates related to crime, policing, and social services, particularly as it relates to our youth. However, a blunt reality is that the criminal law must also play its part with effective offenses and dissuasive penalties. As the Attorney General and Minister responsible for justice, I inherited the responsibility to continue extending the gang-related sunset clause provisions of the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2012 with no end in sight. As members know, sunset clause provisions are those which set a fixed expiration date for legislative provision within an enactment. Typically, sunset clause provisions are used when the underlying policy is sought to fix an interim problem or the enactment is expected to become unnecessary in the future. When the legislature passed the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2012, the country as a whole could neither accept nor pretend that society would be gripped in gang-related criminality such that there would be a continuing need for gang-specific criminal offenses and increased penalties. Mr. Speaker, ministerial notices extending the operation of the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2012 provisions have been issued repeatedly over the past 10 years. We have no responsible option that allows us to dispense with the attendant provisions addressing unlawful gang activity in the foreseeable future. With the support of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Commissioner of Police, it is our collective view that the intent and utility of these provisions remain crucial to the overall efforts to mitigate against the proliferation of criminal gang activity. Thus, after 10 years, the use of sunset provisions to effect policy and legal objectives in question is beyond the life expectancy of policymakers and legislatures had for the 2012 Act. With that, Mr. Speaker and members, this amendment bill simply seeks to permanently include sections 33A, 70JA, and 70B into the Criminal Code 1907, thereby no longer requiring a sunset clause provision or extension notices to be issued by the minister responsible for justice. I look forward to providing further details of the provisions as the bill advances through the legislative process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of National Security. Minister, would you like to put your statement at this time?
Yes, I will, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you. Good morning, colleagues.
Go right ahead, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform this Honorable House that the Royal Bermuda Regiment conducted their first overseas camp since 2019. In total, over 140 soldiers and police officers deployed to U.S. Marine Corps Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, over the 2 weeks from May 8th to May 22nd, 2022. Mr. Speaker, the unifying aim of the overseas camp was to exercise elements of the regiment as supporting personnel in high-intensity operations and training over a protracted period of time on an overseas deployment and on a scale not possible in Bermuda. This required identifying a number of training objectives for a wide variety of capabilities within the Royal Bermuda Regiment. Mr. Speaker, during this camp, they focused on developing essential soldiering skills junior non-commissioned officer leadership, Royal Bermuda Regiment Coast Guard qualifications, professional development of the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band, and live firing range work for the Bermuda Police Service. Mr. Speaker, 4 departments within the regiment were tested whilst deployed. 19 private soldiers attended and completed the potential junior non-commissioned officer cadre, including 10 from the Turks and Caicos Islands Regiment, to develop their leadership and technical capabilities in preparation for potential promotion. Mr. Speaker, the Royal Bermuda Regiment Coast Guard were hosted by the U.S. Coast Guard to requalify 15 people, including 1 Bermuda Police Service officer in technical boat handling to maintain their ability to protect Bermuda's coastal waters. Mr. Speaker, the exercise also allowed the regiment to practice the deployment of A and B Company into an unfamiliar setting with full operational equipment and all of the logistical needs associated with such a large-scale deployment. This ability to deploy at scale will greatly benefit the regiment if it is required to deploy any troops as part of an independent or joint humanitarian aid and/or disaster relief style operation over the next 12 months. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate all those who took part and thank the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Beasley, and the soldiers and officers of the Royal Bermuda Regiment for ensuring the continued training and readiness of the regiment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Education. Minister, would you like to put your statement?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Is my camera on? Can you see me? Okay, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, let me remind you of dress code when you're in Parliament. Necktie, coat. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I'd like to share with honorable colleagues information about the recent graduation event at the Bermuda College and provide details of this incredible class of 2022. Mr. Speaker, like most universities and colleges, commencement represents the culmination and highlight of the academic year for Bermuda College. Bermuda College's commencement also marks the start of the graduation season for Bermuda. This year, for the first time since the pandemic, Bermuda College held a face-to-face ceremony. It returned to the big tent on its sports field with entrepreneur, author, and community activist Ms. Kristen White as the commencement speaker. The graduate's address was delivered by Ms. Solio Graham, a dual enrollment student from the Berkeley Institute who received her Associate of Science in Pre-Med. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to note that there were 93 graduates, with 47% of the class of 2022 graduating with honors, earning either merit, GPA of 3.0 to 3.49, or distinction, GPA of 3.5 to 4.0 status, with the Associates of Arts in Business Administration program producing the largest graduate group with 23 graduates. There was also one student, Isaiah Cabral, who earned both his Associates in Science in Actuarial Science and his Associates in Arts in Business Administration. Mr. Speaker, please indulge me in this time to share a number of the graduates for other programs represented on the graduation list, which includes from the Division of Arts and Science, the Associate of Arts in Art Design, 8 graduates, Associate of Arts, 15 graduates, Associate of Arts Early Childhood Education, 2 graduates, Associate of Arts and Science, 2 graduates, Associate of Science, 3 graduates, Associate of Science in Actuarial Science, 3 graduates, Associate of Science Education, 2 graduates, and Foundation Diploma Program UK, 1 graduate. From the Division of Business, Hospitality, and Technical Education, we have a Certificate for Accounting Technician, 1 graduate, Certificate in Applied Science Technology, 5 graduates, Certificate in Electrical Wiring Technology, 2 graduates, Certificate in Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning Technology, 2 graduates, Certificate in Motor Vehicle Technology, 2 graduates, Certificate in Plumbing Technology, 2 graduates, Diploma in Culinary Arts, 2 graduates, Diploma in Food and Beverage Management, 2 graduates, Diploma in Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning Technology, 1 graduate, Diploma in Plumbing Technology, 2 graduates, Associate of Applied Science in Culinary Arts, 1 graduate, Associate of Applied Science Hospitality Management, 1 graduate, Associate of Arts, Business Administration, 23 graduates. Associate of Science, Computer Information Systems, 5 graduates. And finally, from the Division of Nursing and Allied Health, Associate of Science, Nursing, 5 graduates. Associate of Science, Pre-Health Science, 1 graduate, and Associate of Science, Pre-Medical Science, 1 graduate. Mr. Speaker, I am most pleased to share that 7 graduates are dual enrollment students who will be awarded associate's degrees, diplomas, or certificates before receiving their high school certificates later this month. I want Bermuda to know the names of our public school students who have done extremely well in this program. They are from the Berkeley Institute, Jaden Anderson, Certificate in Applied Science Technology. Salil Graham, Associate in Science, Pre-Med. Callan Richardson, Associate in Science, Actuarial Science. From Cedar Bridge Academy, Jakai Barkley, Certificate in Applied Science Technology. Righteous Simons, Diploma in Culinary Arts. Joshua Vera, Certificate in Applied Science Technology, and Aaron White, Certificate in Applied Science Technology. 254 awards were earned from PACE, the Professional and Continuing Education Division, including 73 City and Guilds Employability Skills Certificates and 10 Nursing Assistant Certificates, also from both senior public schools. Mr. Speaker, other outstanding award recipients include Most Outstanding Arts Graduate, Caleb and Leah Lee. Most Outstanding Actuarial Science Graduate, Isaiah Cabral. Most Outstanding Education Graduate, Malay Robinson. Most Outstanding Early Childhood Education Graduate, Marina Shaw. Most Outstanding Science Graduate, Salil Graham, who was a dual enrollment student. Arts and Science Distinguished Dean's Award, Maya Pert. Overall Most Outstanding Division of Arts Science Award graduate, Isaiah Cabral. Most Outstanding General Business Graduate, Rakai Burrows. Most Outstanding Management Graduate, Amber Furtado. Most Outstanding Accounting Finance Graduate, again, Isaiah Cabral. Most Outstanding Information Technology Graduate, Josiah Johnson. Most Culinary Arts Graduate, Ondura Ford. Business and Hospitality Dean's Award for Excellence, Miguel Simas. Most Outstanding Plumbing Graduate, Takai Bell. Most Outstanding Computer and Program Graduate, Jaden Anderson, again, another dual enrollment student who happens to be the son of member MP Anthony Richardson. No, I should say Jaden. I'm sorry, apologies for that. Most Outstanding Materials and Mechanics Graduate, Aaron White, dual enrollment. Most Outstanding Electronics Graduate, Jakai Berkeley, dual enrollment. Director of Nursing and Allied Health Leadership Award, Rhonda Lynn Taplin. Excellence in Clinical Nursing Practice Award, Riley Mello. Nursing Impact Award, Charlie Simmons and Wanda Trott-Maury. Nursing Academic Achievement Award, Judith Shakir. And Applied Health Academic Achievement Award, Salil Graham, again, dual enrollment. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the 9 students who graduated with their bachelor's and master's degree through the partnerships Bermuda College has with Mount St. Vincent and Miami University, respectively. There are 6 Mount St. Vincent students who completed their Bachelor of Business Administration degrees in association with Bermuda College, and 3 students who completed their master's in special education with Miami University. Mr. Speaker, I ask that you and other members of the House join me in congratulating the Bermuda College class of 2022 who discovered and followed their path at Bermuda College. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor. Minister, would you like to present your statement?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure today to rise before this honorable House to provide an overview of the Consumer Price Index, the methodology behind its calculations, and to talk generally about Bermuda's rate of inflation. Mr. Speaker, this House will be aware of recent comments in the media about inflation in other parts of the world and the concerns regarding the accuracy of the statistics produced here in Bermuda. The government of Bermuda stands firmly behind the methodology used and the integrity of the data produced by the Department of Statistics. Mr. Speaker, the Consumer Price Index is a statistical tool used for measuring the rate of inflation and change in the general level of prices of consumption of goods and services by private households. The index measures price movement of a given quality and quantity of goods and services. The combination of goods and services comprising the index are figuratively referred to as a shopping basket. Mr. Speaker, in constructing the basket, thousands of selected goods and services were organized by commodity and service type, and then divided into subcomponents and assigned to one of the following 9 major expenditure groups, or aggregate indices: food, rent, clothing and footwear, tobacco and liquor, fuel and power, household goods, services and supplies, transport and vehicles, education, recreation, entertainment and reading, and health and personal care. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Statistics uses the United Nations Consumer Price Index Manual for methodological and computational guidance. A modified Lespier's approach is used to measure the rate of change in a fixed set of prices over time. The computation of the CPI begins with the collection of over 3,100 price data from retail stores and household service providers. The frequency of pricing varies and is conducted either monthly, quarterly, or annually. Once the prices of goods and services have been collected, they are verified and cross-checked to ensure validity of the data being used in the CPI calculations. Prices are compared with previous months and years' price data to monitor price fluctuations and maintain consistency. Mr. Speaker, it is imperative to maintain the fixed shopping basket in terms of the quality of items it contains. Over the life of the CPI shopping basket, the sale of some goods and services in the basket will discontinue, and the qualitative consumption of others will change. The need to replace missing items is common to all CPIs, since the characteristics of some items evolve frequently while the production or sale of others is discontinued. As such, the methodology accounts for this occurrence, and in Bermuda, we do substitute items within the basket of goods. For details of the department's CPI methodological procedures is outlined in the publication Understanding the Consumer Price Index, which is available on the Department of Statistics portal. Mr. Speaker, the base period for the current CPI is April 2015, and it is a reference point for measuring price change of goods and services. Bermuda's current CPI basket of goods and services is derived from a 2013 household expenditure survey, which collected income and expenditure patterns and levels for all residents. Mr. Speaker, the survey had 3 main objectives. Firstly, to collect household income to provide an indication of the living standards of Bermuda's residents. Secondly, to update consumer expenditure benchmarks estimates for inclusion in the gross domestic product calculation. And thirdly, to obtain current household expenditure data on goods and services to reflect spending habits of Bermuda's residents for the purpose of rerating the CPI. Mr. Speaker, the HES provides detailed weekly expenditure data required for an assessment of a household spending patterns. The CPI re-rating process reviews items in the shopping basket with a view to include new items or removing items that are no longer sufficient. The average weekly household spending totals for the major consumption groups as reported in a HES reflect the expenditure rates or relative spending share that comprise the 9 sectors of the current CPI shopping basket. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the rent sector of Bermuda's CPI basket accounted for the largest household spending share, or weight among the 9 sectors of the CPI, 26.7%. This sector tracks the price of a basket of dwelling units subject to rent control and units not subject to rent control, land tax, repair rates, material cost, and home content insurance. Currently, rents are stable. The rating of the rent sector is causing a stabilizing effect on the overall rate of inflation, as other sectors such as food which is rising month to month. Mr. Speaker, if there is not significant movement in the sectors with the largest rates, the inflation rate will remain moderate. The sectors are rated as follows: food, 11.5%, rent, 26.7%, clothing and footwear, 2.5%, tobacco and liquor, 3.1%, fuel and power, 3.9%, household goods, services and supplies, 11.6%, transport, 13%, education, recreation and reading, 14.7%, health and personal care, 13%. And that combines the all items index, which will create a total of 100%. Mr. Speaker, in response to ongoing dialogue comparing Bermuda's inflation to that of other countries, it is imperative to account for differences in weighting across the sectors. Additionally, the factors that impact the movement of inflation are country specific. Historically, Bermuda has conducted an HES approximately every 10 years. The last survey was conducted in 2013, and previously surveys were held in the years 2004, 1993, 1982, and 1974. The data collection period ranges from 6 weeks to 4 months. Mr. Speaker, in response to a request from the Department of Statistics in June 2022, the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center conducted a technical assistance mission to improve the CPI, including the design and conduct of a household expenditure survey for the estimation of expenditure rates. The Department of Statistics has been advised that international best practice has shifted and that the household expenditure survey should now be conducted every 5 years instead of 10. In addition, CONTACT recommended that the Department of Statistics conduct data collection over a 12-month period to better capture seasonal spending habits. Mr. Speaker, it is anticipated that the department will commence data collection on a new household expenditure survey within the next 12 months. However, a revised CPI shopping basket and expenditure rates will not become available until approximately 2 years after the data collection is completed, which will see the base year shift from 2015 to 2025. Between the 6th and 17th of June 2022, the department is participating in a remote technical assistance mission with CONTACT to acquire further advice on the CPI and HES. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Director, Melinda Williams, and her team of technical officers for their hard work and dedication during these challenging times. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is then in the name of the Minister of Transport. Minister?
Morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, on the 18th of February, 2022, I advised the Honorable House that 30 new buses had arrived and would be operational after decommissioning, and the Department of Public Transport's bus operators and garage staff had received training on the buses. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to confirm that the buses were operational during the first week of April, and that the department's mission is to move Bermuda with a quality bus service. Over the last 8 weeks, the department has delivered consistent and reliable service without mass cancellations. Even after deploying public buses to ensure students arrived at school safely and on time this past Monday, there was only one cancellation to the published schedule. And this morning, there are no cancellations. A marked improvement over summer last year, when cancellations were up to 50 a day. Mr. Speaker, we have turned the corner, pun intended. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to transitioning to a more sustainable and more intelligent public bus system that improves the quality of life for our residents. Under Phase 2 of the bus management project, the ministry will purchase 10 additional new electric buses over the next few months, making almost 50% of our fleet electric. The ministry also intends to bring legislation to lay the foundation for digitized fare. Mr. Speaker, the electric buses have only been operating for just over 2 months. The feedback from residents is that the journey on the new buses is more enjoyable experience with a quiet, smooth ride and no exhaust fumes at the bus stops. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank the hardworking staff at the Department of Public Transportation, the supervisors, the operators, and the executive thereof for their cooperation with integrating the new electric buses into the public bus schedule. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement will be the statement that we indicated earlier. It had not been on the board paper. That statement, I'll name it because we still have it. We get it on SharePoint. However, once the Premier starts to read the statement, it'll be on the parliamentary website for you to follow. It's the Cost of Living Commission Amendment Act 2020 brought into force is the title of that statement this morning from the Premier. And again, you can follow it on the parliamentary website rather than the SharePoint. Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to report to this Honorable House that the Cost of Living Commission Amendment Act 2020 is being brought into force as of today, June 17, 2022. Mr. Speaker, this act passed the legislature in June of 2022, but when I resumed duties as Minister of Finance, it came to my attention that this bill was never brought into force. As a reminder for members of this Honorable House and the listening public, the Cost of Living Commission Amendment Act 2020 provided for the following. Increased powers for the chair of the Cost of Living Commission to request information from retailers. The power for the minister responsible for consumer affairs to declare a commodity as essential. And the power to require retailers to report the price of essential commodities to the Cost of Living Commission. Mr. Speaker, the Cost of Living Commission has met 5 times under the leadership of the Honorable Deputy Speaker, the member for Hamilton East, MP Derek Burgess, and I've been furnished with recommendations from the Commission. Mr. Speaker, in April, I met with the Chair to discuss the recommendations from the Cost of Living Commission for an essential basket of 34 commodities and recommendations for duty reductions for those goods that were deemed essential. At that meeting, I advised the Chair that I would bring the Cost of Living Commission Amendment Act 2020 into force to allow the government to formally declare the commodities recommended by the Commission as essential commodities. Further, Mr. Speaker, at that meeting, I stated that the government would look at reducing the duty rates on essential commodities recommended that were not already at 0%, save for sugar, to allow for price reductions. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that this government will act to reduce duty rates on foods. In this PLP's government first budget delivered in this Honorable House in 2018, this government eliminated customs duty on the following: eggs, potatoes, cauliflower, broccoli, carrots, turnips, oranges, and apples. However, Mr. Speaker, though the duty on these items were eliminated in 2018, many persons stated that they did not see these reductions passed on to consumers. Mr. Speaker, the act that will be brought into force today contains provision that retailers must report the price of essential goods to the Cost of Living Commission. This means that the public will be able to track the change in the price of the 34 essential goods following the government's move to reduce duty on those staple goods recommended by the Cost of Living Commission. Mr. Speaker, the cost of living has long been a challenge for us all in Bermuda. And though this government acted in March to freeze the price paid at the pump to February levels, and though, as the Minister of Economy and Labor just stated in his statement, we are seeing stability in rent prices due to the policies of this government, the price of food, which we cannot control, has escalated. The latest official figures show an increase of 5% year over year, but there are many items that have seen significant year over year increases. An example is in January, it was reported that frozen spare ribs increased by 28% in just 1 year. Mr. Speaker, sadly, the Bermuda government cannot control the cost of food. And these challenges are not unique to Bermuda, as food prices are increasing globally. Equally as troubling, interest rates are expected to increase significantly in the near term, and that will mean Bermudians will be paying more for loans and mortgages, further squeezing household budgets. Mr. Speaker, the government is aware of the challenges being faced by residents, and though we have acted to provide support by freezing gasoline prices, reducing payroll taxes for those making less than $96,000 a year, reducing vehicle licensing fees, and extending concessions to employers, more must be done. In this year's budget statement delivered in February on behalf of this government, I pledge that there will be relief now and more relief to come. And, Mr. Speaker, this government will deliver on that pledge. Mr. Speaker, before this House rises on July 15th, the government will bring to this honorable House a comprehensive package to tackle challenges faced by the increasing cost of food that will provide additional support to the many Bermudians who require assistance to make ends meet. This package is currently being prepared by the Ministry of Finance and will be discussed at the next meeting of the Cabinet. However, Mr. Speaker, there are limits to the support that the government can provide, as it is vital for Bermuda's economic future that the government meets its budget targets. With global inflation set to continue for the foreseeable future, and with a growing number of economists predicting a recession in the world's largest economy and our largest trading partner, the United States, all residents must be wise with their spending choices. These are uncertain economic times, especially as we cope with rebuilding our economy following the coronavirus pandemic. And the government will be fiscally prudent while also delivering the relief needed by many. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I'd like to thank the chairman and members of the Cost of Living Commission for their work to date. It has not been an easy task, but it will be made easier with the coming into force of the Cost of Living Commission Amendment Act 2020. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Premier. And again, reminder to members, the glitch in the SharePoint hasn't been resolved yet, so that statement isn't on SharePoint, but it is on the parliamentary website. Once we resolve the SharePoint issue, we'll put it on SharePoint for you as well. Thank you, members, ministers, for participating in the statement period. We'll now move on. Reports of committees. There are none. Question period. This morning we have a written question from the opposition whip to the Minister of Economy, Mr. Hayward, and Minister Hayward. And let's note the time. It's now 10:43. Opposition whip, would you like to put your... Oh, actually, they would just require for a written response. So not for all questions. So the listening audience, when questions are put in writing to ministers, they have the option of having it as an oral response so that the public will hear the oral response and further questions could be put, or they can simply have it as a written response. And in this case, the 3 questions that have been asked have sought for just a written response. So, Opposition Whip, have you received your written responses?
Morning, Mr. Speaker. I have not yet.
You have not. Ms. Hayward, do you have the written responses for the member?
Yes, I have, and I was my indication that they had been supplied to the House.
Members, if you go on the SharePoint on the parliamentary questions section, the answers are on the SharePoint. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Opposition Whip. With that said, that's the only written questions for today. So we will now move on to the questions that arise out of this morning's statements. And this morning we have a few members who wish to ask questions based on the statements this morning. And we'll start with the Deputy Premier. Deputy Premier, from your statement this morning, a member would like to put a question to you. And that question comes from MP Pearman. MP Pearman, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Deputy Premier. Thank you for your statement to the House this morning explaining the extension of the transitional period for the Domestic Partnership Act, which will now confirm marriages for people who were at same-sex marriages during that relevant period. My question for you, please, Honorable Minister and Deputy Premier, is that the extension seems to carve out a period of time from the 1st of June 2018 to the 23rd of November 2018, suggesting that any marriages that occurred during that period would not be valid. Can you confirm why that period is being carved out?
Minister?
Can the member, I had a little spur of his question. I didn't get it all.
Sure. Member, can you just repeat your question?
Oh, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker.
I'm happy to repeat that. Thank you. So, Minister, today you gave a statement to the Honorable House explaining that the transitional period was going to be extended, thereby ensuring that certain same-sex marriages will remain valid for a period of time, notwithstanding the Privy Council decision. However, that extension expressly carves out a period from the 1st of June 2018 to the 23rd of November 2018, where any marriages occurring in that 6-month period would not be valid. And I'm just asking why that carve out is happening at all. I don't follow why it's happening.
Minister?
I think the honorable member has perhaps misunderstood. I believe that period that he's mentioning is a period where, well, one, that the decision of the Chief Justice was stayed. Until,
yes, but as I read the bill and per your statement,
right,
and
so that's a period where there were no marriages conducted at all.
Is that the answer, Minister? Were
Yes,
there no marriages
conducted at all during that time? That's the period that you're referring to.
I'm referring
at all.
Thank you, Minister. I'm referring to the period of the 1st of June 2018 until the 23rd of November 2018. And if the answer is that there were no marriages in that period, then I'm grateful for the answer. Thank you, Deputy Premier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any supplementaries? No
supplementary from me.
Any member? None? Thank you, member. Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning that indicates we have questions is that from the Minister of the Economy, Minister Hayward. There are members who wish to ask questions of you this morning. And the first is the opposition leader. Opposition leader, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My first question to the Honorable...
Just a reminder to turn your camera on. We hear you clearly, but we don't see you.
Okay. My first question to the minister is, he indicated that the base period for the current consumer price index was April 2015. Can he give an explanation as to why it has not been updated since then?
Mr. Speaker, in order to revise the base period of the index, you have to conduct a household expenditure survey. I highlighted the trend as it pertains to the 10-year period in which we were conducting household expenditure surveys. So the base period, as I indicated in my statement, will be revised once a household expenditure survey is completed. We aim to commence a household expenditure survey within the next 6 to 12 months.
Supplementary?
Supplementary. He gave us an explanation as to the trend, but he didn't tell us why it was not done.
Understood?
Mr. Speaker, I am not understanding the question. The question is, why haven't we conducted our HES survey?
Yes.
And the answer to the question is we seek to conduct the HES survey within the next 6 to 12 months. The HES survey is a survey that requires individuals to go into the home.
I know what it is. I know what it is.
Mr. Speaker, I would appreciate it if you protect from the interjection of the opposition leader.
Yeah. So absolutely. My question is, have you got the answer? Now that you say you know what it is.
No, I know how the process works. So there's no need for him to explain it to me.
Okay. And your question was, when will it be done again? Or wasn't it done? And I think
why was it not done? That was my question. When it's going to be done again? My question was, why was it not done since 2013?
Mr. Speaker, I was attempting to answer the question that the desired date for conducting it would have been the period of 2019 moving into 2020. However, we all know the events that took place as it pertained to the pandemic. I was explaining to the benefit of the listening public, those that don't know, it required interviewers to go into individuals' households at a period of time where we were in the midst of a pandemic. And so this is the next best time to conduct the survey since we're getting to a period of a new normal.
Okay, I accept that answer.
Thank you.
My second question.
Any that's about action. Is it an additional question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a supplemental.
Is it a supplemental on the first one or your second question?
My second question.
Okay, go ahead.
How did the government calculate the cost of living increases paid to beneficiaries of pensions and some government employees from 2013? Because there were cost of living increases paid to employees, paid to pensioners, and in some cases, financial aid. So if they didn't have the inflation figures, how did they arrive at it to make these disbursements to the public based on a cost of living adjustment?
Mr. Speaker, since 1963, after the World War, I believe, we have never had a gap in our consumer price index inflation figures. And so we have always produced a consumer price index as a country, and we have never had a gap in data.
Supplementary?
Can he repeat his answer? Because I'm not sure that he answered my question.
It is indicating that there hasn't been a gap in collection of the data since back in the 1960s, if I'm correct?
Correct.
But my question was, how did the government calculate the cost of living adjustments for pensioners who received a cost of living adjustment for the past 10 years? The same if government employees, some government employees get an annual cost of living adjustment. Some of financial aid benefits get cost of living adjustments. If they hadn't calculated the cost of living, how did they arrive at the adjustments for these payouts from the consolidated fund to the people of this country for their pensions, financial aid, and for government employee salaries?
Mr. Speaker, there has always been a cost of living calculation published to the public. I don't know the nature of the opposition leader's question as it pertains to he is inferring that there is a gap in data somewhere, and I'm stating that there hasn't been a gap in data, and we've always put out consumer price index or inflation numbers for decades.
So then this is where we need clarity. In his statement, he said the last report was 2015 based on 2013. And since 2015, one wants to know like 2020, 2019, what was the average inflation rate for the government? What did the government use as the average inflation rate? He confirmed in his statement that the last inflation rate was calculated officially in 2015 based on 2013 Household Expenditure Index. That's what he has in his statement. So I'm just asking what happened after 2015.
Mr. Speaker, in all due respect, the opposition leader is misleading the public in that we have a consistent time series over the last 40 years. There's been no gap in producing inflation numbers. What the member is referring to is you do a household expenditure survey. So the household expenditure survey was done in 2013. You use your old series of the household expenditure survey that was done in 2004 until you revise your base period. You got a new base period in April 2015. So our series reverts to 100 in April 2015 and then is projected forward from that particular period. When we do a new household expenditure survey within the next 12 months, if the survey ends in 2023, it takes us a couple years to rebase the current index, and so we'll have a new base rate at 2025. The entire index will be reset back to 100 in 2025. Current series that we're running from 2015 will be relevant until we rebase, and so there is no gap in data.
You, opposition leader?
I'll go to my supplemental.
Which is
Can the minister give this House the estimated inflation rate for Bermuda for 2010, 2020, 2022? An estimated inflation rate for Bermuda for 2010, 2020, 2022.
Mr. Speaker, that is public information that is published on the Department of Statistics their page. You don't have any gap in those data series. So I can
Mr. Speaker, I'm not asking him for data gaps. I'm just asking him for the percentage inflation rate.
Mr. Speaker?
I think it's what the minister was trying to say is that the information is publicly available on the website and that it is published. There haven't been any gaps, so the information has been published.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Additional to that, Mr. Speaker, there are not forecasts or estimates for that period. There are actual rates that have been published.
Thank you. Another supplementary or another question?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Supplementary, MP Jackson?
Yes, thank
Jackson,
you.
you can put your supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just wondering if we might be able to ask the minister if he could acknowledge the fact that although there is this structured system in place to calculate the consumer price index, could the minister just acknowledge that what is coming out as inflationary percentage increase does not feel reflective of what people are seeing in the stores?
I missed some of that. Did you get it on, Minister?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
The member is saying the overall rate of inflation is actually at 2.5%, and I explained why it is pegged on. But she is saying that the overall price increases is not a reflection of what people are feeling in these stores. But if we look at the indicator itself, for example, if I go to the February 2022 Consumer Price Index report, it stated that in the food sector, such as fresh and frozen leg of lamb increased 13.8%, frozen green beans 10.8%, and rice 9.8%. Those are huge increases in the price of those consumer goods. I think that the Consumer Price Index accurately reflects the price increases that are experienced in our stores. But the overall rate of inflation is much lower than the experience that persons will find in a food store, which is one of 9 sectors within the index.
Does it help for you, member?
Yes, it is. I have one other supplementary, if that's allowed.
What's your second sub?
Thank you. So as we're calculating through our next consumer survey and the 2023 recalculation, given the almost unreasonably high prices that people are paying today, is that going to then create the foundation for our consumer price index for then the next 10 years? Or are we going to have some flexibility, and hopefully we can call this price inflationary price, that this is some anomaly because of the global pandemic? So are we going to consider an anomaly that we're in right now as far as the price of goods? Or are we going to start the consumer price survey based on these high prices? And are we then expected as a community to have to live with the increased price of consumer goods for now the next 10 years?
Mr. Speaker, in all due respect, that was maybe 6 questions that the member asked.
Yeah, I was here jotting it down, trying to put a point to it all. Member, if you can sort of finite that to one basic question. I was trying to jot myself into one. I couldn't just get it for you. If you can just put in one question.
Okay, here's one question. Is the consumer survey that's going to be conducted in 2023, are the prices that are going to be recorded in that survey going to be the foundation for the next 10 years?
Mr. Speaker, the Wholesale Expenditure Survey measures wholesale expenditure. It does not measure the prices in consumer stores. And so the foundation of the survey is based off one's household expenditure. There is no anomaly in the high cost of food in Bermuda. We've had what I'll consider to be heightened food prices for decades. And so our high cost of living has been published worldwide as being one of the highest in the world. I would think at this point we have to accept that the high prices in Bermuda are a normal occurrence and not a freakish or extraordinary event as the member is trying to state. The other thing is the member is making the assumption that somehow prices across the board will abate. And that's not necessarily correct as well. And so this is why we will monitor the expenditure of households over a 1-year period so that we can get a proper average expenditure of households so that we can apply proper rates to the relevant sectors.
Thank you. Okay. Now, I think you've used up your supplementaries. I hope the answer helps to suffice you.
Yes, very much. Thank you.
No problem. Minister, the officers and whip also had questions for you. Officer, do you still wish to put your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you. I note that the Honorable Minister in his statement said that the Household Expenditure Survey, international best practice, was every 10 years. Could the Minister please clarify if the survey is every 10 years, why one was being conducted
or supposed to be conducted in 2019.
Minister?
What you do is you want to ensure that you have a 10-year period of consistent data. If you're valid within that 10-year period, it's fine. And so what we wanted to do is ensure that we were in front of the 8 ball in terms of producing the data, as well as when we have regional consultation with contact, and they recommend that we move to a 5-year period. And you'll see that in our series moving forward, a period much shorter than the 10-year period. But I think if you just look at our series, the last one was conducted in 2004, and then 2013 would have been a 9-year period between the conducting of those 2 household expenditure surveys. And so it is actually an advantage if you do conduct your survey at an earlier period of time and based off technical consultation that would have been our desire.
Member?
Supplemental, please, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, with the supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the CARTEC consultation, what prompted the director of the Department of Statistics to reach out to CARTEC in June 2022?
So this is CARTEC. The CARTEC regional consultation is something that we do for all statistical outputs and not just for the consumer price index. And so this is a regular occurrence in terms of ensuring that you have your methodology is on and that you are keeping up with best practices.
Supplementary?
A new question, please, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a second question? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Honorable Minister please explain in his statement on pages 5 and 6, he has a table labeled changes in weights of components of the CPI. And would the Honorable Minister please clarify that these weights are derived from the Household Expenditure Survey of 2013?
Minister?
So in the statement, the weights are derived from the 2013 Household Expenditure Survey.
Supplemental, please, Mr. Speaker.
There I am.
Thank you. Would the Honorable Minister be able to speak to why fuel is weighted, sorry, not fuel, food is weighted what it is, how they arrive at that weight for food, which looks like about 11% of total household expenditure according to this number.
So what the surveyors do, they monitor the expenditure of households on a month-to-month basis over a period of time for a stratified portion of households within the economy. Then you get to average household expenditure. From that average household expenditure, you're able to divide that household expenditure into the components. So if you just look at your own monthly expenses, you say, how much of my income goes to rent, how much goes to food, how much goes to education, recreation, and reading, how much goes to foreign travel and things of that nature. The amount of money you spend on food as a proportion of your overall expenditure for that month helps to derive the weight of food in the basket.
Supplemental, please, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, but your supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Minister. So the current government position is that based on this household survey from 2013, that food is 10% of household spending in Bermuda. Is that correct?
Incorrect. The measure is 11.5%.
Supplement. You used it to supplement third question.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Third question. Given the Minister's statement on the new household expenditure survey on page 7, wherein the Minister said a revised CPI shopping basket and expenditure rates will not become available until approximately 2 years after the data collection, which we're seeing in the next 12 months. Food will remain at 11% of household expenditure in our statistical model until 2025. Is that correct?
Correct. The current rates will be applicable until we rebase and revise the indices.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker.
It's a supplementary.
The current conclusions reached in the household expenditure survey and the CPI are those data inputs currently used by the Wage Commission in determining their next step, which I believe is a living wage?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know what data inputs the Wage Commission factored into their calculations. If it's not explicitly stated in the report, I will not know.
Okay. Supplementary?
None, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Minister. Minister, there's no further questions for you at this point, so we thank you all for your participation there. The next statement this morning that has questions is that of the Minister of Transport. Minister, the opposition spokesperson for Transport would like to put a question to you. MP Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My first question to the Minister of Transport. There was mention of the legislation to lay the foundation for fair digitization. And I'm just curious if the public should anticipate any fare increases as a part of that new digitization.
Minister?
There's no intent at this time to increase the fare.
Supplementary?
No supplementary. I have a second question, and thank you, Minister.
What's your second question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My second question for the Minister is I'm just wondering how the new bus schedule is going. I know that it began under MP De Silva, and I'm just curious whether the public bus schedule is how it's progressing.
Minister?
At this time, the ministry believes that the best time to really look at the public bus schedule is after we have 1 year of active ridership data, which would only come after the implementation of a digital fare media type system.
Supplementary?
So is the minister then saying that there would not be any real progress on the bus schedule until after digitization?
I think he was saying he wouldn't have a report, but Minister, respond. Minister, we don't have your audio.
Sorry about that. We have modified the bus schedule somewhat as best as we can to accommodate different numbers and mainly student runs. But otherwise than that, we are going to wait to do a more wholesome and robust schedule amendment after having 1 year of ridership data, which would come after the implementation of a digital fare media type system.
Supplementary?
Thank you. No supplementary, but I do have a third question.
Yeah. What's your third question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if this is already in the public domain or not, but I'm just curious whether the public transport has calculated anticipated savings for the new electric buses, any savings calculated for fuel costs and maintenance?
Minister?
That is already in the public domain and was put in the public domain several times during the budget debate and also during several ministerial statements when we spoke about the implementation and the introduction of the electric buses, as well as press statements.
Okay. Supplementary?
None at this time. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Thank you, Minister. Minister, that was the only questions for you this morning. We will now go to the statement from the Premier. Premier, there are members who wish to put questions to you. The first this morning is from the Opposition Leader. Opposition Leader, would you like to put your question?
Thank you. I just have one question.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Premier, you indicated in your statement that the Cost of Living Commission Amendment Act 2020 passed in June 2020, and you were bringing it into force June 17th, 2022. Why has it taken 2 years to bring the legislation into force?
Thank you, Mr. If I may, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honorable Opposition Leader for his question. I cannot speak to the reason as to why, but when I became aware at the meeting with the the chairman of the Cost of Living Commission that I held in April, I gave directions that the act be brought into force.
Supplementary?
No, because he basically indicated that he didn't know why it has taken 2 years to bring a piece of legislation, make it enforceable.
Okay, do you have a second question?
No, I have no more questions.
Okay, so, someone have a supplementary?
Speaker, it's Canadair.
Anthony Kennedy, put your supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the answer, Premier. Taking into consideration that you have been quoted many times as wanting to lead the charge with this cost of living, and there was a mandate of the PLP, you as Premier sent that mandate out. Printed off a few quotes from you stating that cost of living was one of those main things you were going to address. My question for you then is, being that the case, why did you not then remind or bring it to the then finance minister that it's been 2 years, it's been a year, or it's been a year and a half, or a year and 3/4? This is something that's important. Cost of living has been a challenge since the last recession in 2008. Why did you not bring it to the attention of the then minister?
Mr. Speaker, when I became aware that the Cost of Living Amendment Act 2020 was not brought into force, I gave directions to make sure it was brought into force.
Basically, I think the Premier is indicating that up until then, it wasn't at his first awareness, action was taken.
Yes, but my question is it was a mandate of his as the Premier to address the cost of living. Why did he not bring it to the attention of the then minister that it's been this long a period of time?
Mr. Speaker, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm appreciative of the honorable member pushing this line, but I think it's important to note the difference in records between the two governments. The government that he led for a period of time, the government of which I've led for a period of time. Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of his government, payroll taxes were raised on employers to the employees to the highest level in history. Under this government, we have reduced payroll taxes for workers, saving workers a cumulative $5,000 since we have been elected. Mr. Speaker, gasoline prices and gasoline taxes were double under his government. And Mr. Speaker, we have taken action to reduce those taxes, to freeze the pipe at the pump, Mr. Speaker. If it were not for that action, gas prices over this period of time have increased by 25%. The fact is the government has taken action. What we are seeing here is the bringing into force of this particular bill, and speaking about the recommendations which came from the Cost of Living Commission, Mr. Speaker.
He has completely avoided the question.
Your supplementaries were used. I believe you do have your name down for questions, so you can save your question for then. The officers of whip, would you like to put your question now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Oh, sorry, good morning, Honorable Premier. In the Honorable Premier's statement at page 2, he stated that at a April meeting, government would look at reducing the duty rates on essential commodities recommended that were not already at 0%. Has the government reduced those duties that were not at 0% to 0% yet?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, duty rate changes have to come to the Honorable House of Assembly. As the Honorable member would have noted from my statement, I said that before the House rises, that we will bring a comprehensive package of matters, and I'm certain that duty rate adjustments will be included in that.
Supplementary?
And then second question, please, Mr. Speaker.
Second question, go right ahead.
Thank you. The Honorable Premier stated again on page 2 that although the duty on these items, essential goods, were eliminated in 2018, many persons stated they did not see those reductions passed on to the consumers. Would the Honorable Premier be able to, has government, ascertained why those reductions were not passed on, or has government inquired into why those reductions weren't passed on with the grocers?
Premier?
Thank you. I think that the chairman of the Cost of Living Commission would certainly be better able to speak to that, Mr. Speaker. One of the important things to note is that with the bringing of the force into this act, the Cost of Living Commission actually transfers from the Ministry of Finance over to the Minister responsible for Community Affairs. Minister responsible for Community Affairs will be, at this point in time, is the Honorable Attorney General and the Minister of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Reform. I think that it's also important to note, Mr. Speaker, that this does allow the government to have the powers unquestionably to track those changes. So if there's any duty reductions that are made, whether they be at the wholesale or retail level, the government will be able to state whether or not those things, or be able to judge whether or not those matters have been passed on.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Would the Honorable Premier please clarify that it is in fact the chairman of the Cost of Living Commission who inquired into why we haven't seen those reductions passed on to consumers?
Mr. Speaker, if I may, sorry.
You're right.
Mr. Speaker, if the Honorable Member would read the Cost of Living Commission Act, it is the chairman and the commission who is empowered to seek information from retailers and persons in regards to matters that related to price. What we saw in 2018 with our reduction, there were persons who said that those matters were not passed on to consumers. With the change in law, which was made in 2020, which unfortunately was not brought into force until today, if there's any future changes, the government has the unquestioned power to request these matters electronically and at any point in time so they can monitor the change in prices.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Premier. So since the 2018 changes and the feedback from consumers that those reductions were not passed on, government has not inquired into why those reductions weren't made to the consumer.
Further question?
Sorry, for the avoidance of doubt, the government did not make such inquiries. Did the government make such inquiries? Has the government inquired since the 2018 reduction? Has the government inquired as to why those reductions were not passed on to the consumer? The government, not the Cost of Living Commission, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely certain what the Honorable Member is getting at, but I know where he's trying to go. And I think what's important to note is that the record of this government on making sure that we deal with the purchasing power that individuals have to deal with prices inside of our economy is noted and recognized. Mr. Speaker, I've relived and I've rehashed what our record is in this fact. The fact is that where the former government increased duty rates, we cut duty rates. Where the former government increased taxes, we've reduced taxes. And on this particular issue, Mr. Speaker, there was a reduction of rates of duty. There were persons who reported that those rates were not passed on. We responded by changing legislation to ensure that we could track these rates. That legislation was brought in 2020. It came to my attention, unfortunately, this year that this act was never brought into effect. And I gave directions for this act to be brought into effect so that any future changes, the government can firmly track these matters at the wholesale and retail level through a mechanism in the Cost of Living Commission, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. That was your second sub. Do you have a third question?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Opposition Whip. MP candidate, do you still have questions you'd like to put at this stage?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, on page 2, the Premier mentions about going to a 0% on certain commodities, essential commodities. Does the Premier have an idea of the revenue loss to government by going to a 0% on these essential commodities?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, to my recollection, I do believe that was part of the debate in 2018 when we did that. I briefly reviewed some of the hearing slides yesterday. I didn't get to the actual committee stage of the debate, but I think that's public information. The honorable member can check back to the time that was debated in 2018. I do believe that the approximate amounts were shared at that time. And if they are not, he was welcome to send a follow-up question. We're happy to be able to provide that information, but I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Supplementary?
Yeah, supplementary, understanding that those were he's talking about the essential commodities that were already identified. Throughout his statement, he mentioned that there was more to come, that he was meeting with the cabinet. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is with these new reductions, does he have an idea?
Amir? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry I misunderstood the member's question. I thought it was talking about the ones in 2018. All of those matters will certainly be considered. They will form part of the information that will come to this honorable House. As I indicated in my statement, Mr. Speaker, there is a limit to the action in which the government can take, because what is most important, especially in uncertain economic times, is that the government must be fiscally prudent. But any reductions will certainly be costed. Anything that is part of the package will certainly be costed and will be presented to the honorable House. So we can fully debate those matters, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to the support of members of the opposition for the package that the government will bring.
Okay. Second question?
No, thank you.
Okay. No supplementaries? Thank you, members. That actually brings us to a close of the question period this morning on the questions that were submitted from the statements written. So thank you for your participation. Now moving on, it brings us to the congratulatory and obituary speeches.